normal people are struggling, yet ministers are staying in big bungalows.
It was a bit, how to say, off.
We are not just trying to figure out whether corruption takes place.
I think it's a bit stupid how much they spend. It's up to them.
What do you feel like it was a strategy from the opposition?
You think we don't dare to talk about the Ridout saga? This is your daily Ketchup. Look at this statistic up here. We are sad because more than 50% of you are not subscribed. Please, it will do us a huge favor if you would go down below and spend a very few seconds to press subscribe and press the notification bell. On to today's very fast-paced episode because our guest is not as free as all of us here, Okay? See you there. Pew! Good greetings, my fellow Singaporeans! Today we have a special guest here with us. Some of you might know him, some of you might dislike him. Welcome, Kelvin Cheng!
Hey! Very exciting.
So for those of you who don't already know him, Kelvin Cheng is a Singaporean businessman and former nominated Member of Parliament. Can you tell us a bit maybe about what you're currently doing?
I kind of stopped work 6 years ago. I had and then, but I'm still actively investing in stuff. I've also taken on an honorary diplomatic role recently. I'm the first honorary consul of Serbia to Singapore, so I've been a bit busy with that as well.
That sounds amazing, man. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, what do you actually do?
Okay, so smaller countries such as Singapore, Serbia, Finland, we do not have the resources to open an embassy in every country in the world.
Right.
So then they will go to that country and say, can you please recommend me your best looking guy? Because
Makes sense.
we don't actually have
The build-up.
we don't actually have a representative in our country. So your best looking and sexiest guy, I would like him to be our de facto ambassador in that country.
Nice.
But he couldn't make it last.
Yeah, so I was the second best. So it was me. But actually, I mean, jokes aside, they'll probably get someone that is someone who can help, right? Because if Serbian citizens get into trouble in Singapore, then they will come to me because I am the de facto ambassador here.
Yeah, interesting. I thought you...
Yeah.
I thought you're a
Yeah.
non-resident ambassador.
So no, that's
Something else.
That is something else.
But is there a reason why you decided to take this on then, since you are like already
So
retired?
this was it's actually because I am retired, because it's an honorary role. So we don't get paid. It's national service. Before the Ukrainian war, I thought it would be very exciting, very challenging, but now it's turning out to be a bit too challenging because Serbia is in a way in a situation very similar to Singapore. People always ask us, are you on China's side or are you on America's side? And we always say we are on Singapore's side.
Yeah.
So Serbia is in that position as well. Before the war, they were always trying to sit in the middle, be neutral. They were friends. They were very good friends with China and Russia, but they were also on the process of being admitted to the European Union and therefore an ally of the West.
Yep.
But right now, they have been asked to choose. But unlike us, where we don't have to choose because we do not have common borders with America or China, Serbia actually has to choose, right? Because they are actually on the border of the European Union. But they are 97% reliant on Russia for energy. And they are very, very close to China in terms of trade. So they actually have to choose, and it's very, very tough.
So if I can backtrack a bit to when you mentioned that you already retired, right? Because I think many of our viewers will be interested in that. So how did you make a decision at that point in your life, right, that you feel like, okay, now I can let go, I can take a step back?
How'd you get so rich?
I think I grew up in an HDB. I'm a self-made person. At a certain point of time, everyone wants to see what is financial independence. And then once you have enough, you decide that, hey, I want to focus on other things. But I think after 6 years, I got a bit backside itchy. I'm now trying to start new things again. But I am no longer the active entrepreneur. So I would hire a CEO to run the businesses
Right.
for me. And also, I think in 2018 or 2019, I decided that I'm single, I do not have family. I believe that I have very good genes. So I think it's very important for me to reproduce. So I've been trying to focus on see whether I can find a woman who will have me. Right?
So are you on Tinder?
No, I think I'm a bit too high profile for Tinder in Singapore. Right? And I'm trying to to meet people the old-fashioned way. I mean, I might look very young, but I'm actually Gen X. Yeah.
Okay. So like in the businesses that you're building, are they all like concentrated in a particular industry or field that you're specializing
So I'm doing
in,
a
or-
lot in fintech at the
Okay.
moment. Correct.
I heard from John also that one of your other things that you're actually venturing a bit into is modeling.
Yes, correct.
Ah.
Because
You know, wait, hold up. I didn't know whether it was a joke. Then I was like, I don't know him. I followed you on Facebook for a long time. Okay,
Yeah.
you like to make people angry.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense, you know.
Yes,
But you
yes.
like to piss people off also.
So I piss people off because if you realize on social media, if you don't take an extreme position, you cannot go viral,
yeah.
right?
So you were gaming it.
So you take an extreme position, create a bit of controversy, and then you take a step back. Then you can let the conversation flow. So
No, so wait, back to what I was trying to
yeah.
say. So I was introduced to Kelvin and he was like, I'm also trying to be a model, and then he sent me an Instagram photo of a topless. And okay, I'm very nice body.
Topless
very,
photo of himself.
Very respectable.
Yeah, so all of you have to follow me on Instagram.
If
Now I
you
need to
scroll,
see this.
you can find
Yeah.
his topless photos, his nudes lah.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he said, yeah, we should talk about my modeling. Then I just haha.
So a very long time ago, when I was younger and sexier, I was actually the owner of Elite Models. I was president of Elite Models for Asia.
God damn.
Long time ago. So, but now that I've been on a fitness drive for the last 3 or 4 years, I think my friends would see that I've had a bit of change in my physique and everything. So I thought I might want to be an influencer myself, but not just a political influencer, maybe a physical and sensual influencer. You know.
Speaking of like making people angry online and like on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Like, what made you first decide to be so vocal about? the
No,
things
I
you care
have.
about?
I always have things to say from a young. I mean, that's one reason why I was an NMP in the first place, right? I have important things that I feel strongly about that I want to talk about. But in order to do that, you need to create some sort of reaction.
Yeah.
If you don't create a reaction, no one is going to read it. Then what's the point? Correct. The last controversy I was involved with was the cashless payments thing, right?
I saw that.
So again, you know, I was very careful not to actually dox anyone. It's in a way quite clever in the sense that I said
This
that
guy.
I said that I would shame someone, but I actually didn't shame anyone. If you're smart enough to go and look at my post, I didn't actually say who it is,
Yeah.
right? So I brought the conversation to an extreme. People started getting angry. Then it actually came back to the middle to say, hey, it is correct that, you know, you need to have
Shops
both
should try
options,
to digitize
right?
payments.
You need to have cash, you need to have cashless payments, and there needs to be a balance.
So on that note, right?
Yeah.
One of the issues that you were quite vocal about recently is the Ridout Road saga.
How badly do you think this has affected or hurt the two ministers?
During that time, the optics actually looked very good because it was pretty much a shithole.
Comment down below and let us know. Do you think that this whole saga has affected your view of Minister Shanmugam? Like, share, subscribe, and we go back to the episode. Finger guns. Pew, pew. The Ridout Road saga. So that one very early on when the allegations first came out, you already made posts about it.
One reason why I took a strong view right at the beginning was because I was familiar with black and white houses. I was familiar with the process. So the first posts that come out were not about procedures, about conflicts of interest. The first posts that come out, they were playing on the politics of envy, right? Talking about how much the rent should be, why are these things such palatial houses, not knowing that this class of real estate, because I and my friends, we looked at it before, you cannot compare it to private GCBs. You cannot compare it to private houses. So I knew that those allegations were false right from the start.
So if I can do a short summary about that. So in May of 2023, the SecGen of Reform Party, Kenneth Jayaramanam, asserted certain wrongdoings by Minister K. Shanmugam and Minister Vivian Balakrishnan. And he questioned how the both of them could afford to pay the market rent for two of Singapore's most prime residential properties in Ridout Road. This is quote, a direct quote from him.
Those quotes, and then after that, they were coming up with silly guesses of what the rents might be, 200,000, 300,000, which I knew that it cannot be true because I knew what the rentals were, right? That they were actually below market price, and why they were below market price is that most of these places were, I mean, I don't know what kind of rating your show has, they were shitholes. They are mostly shitholes. Most of these places are terrible. They are in derelict condition.
Like the state, it wasn't habitable in some sense.
Yeah,
but that was also something that people kind of latched onto, that they felt that SLA in the end like forked out money to like spruce up their house and all that, and they felt like there was some internal...
No, but again, because they are the landlords, before any tenant move into the house, a landlord needs to restore the place to a habitable state. But with the black and whites, the habitable state is very basic. Like even air conditioning, if you don't have air conditioning, you don't have air conditioning. They're not going to put in air conditioning for you. Right? And I think in the course of the investigation, one of the things that happened was that was revealed was that Mrs. Balakrishnan wanted new toilets. But this is not allowed, because that is an improvement. What they will do is to repair the 100-year-old toilet bowls for you, to make sure that you can shit and piss, right? That's all that is required by them. They want a new toilet bowl, they're going to pay for themselves. So I knew all of this. Then I realized that most people don't know this.
I mean, it's kind of easy to feel like, oh, now suddenly you'll bring up some weird story about my wife wanted a toilet bowl and then she was rejected. All that was in the documents, and it feels reactionary to how the public felt about this whole incident.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is also, I guess it's understandable that most people do not know how black and whites and heritage houses that the SLA managers work.
But I also think it's like the context of the time, right? Because like I understand, like if I'm a tenant and I look at a place and like maybe the house, the ceiling is cracked, I will ask the landlord also to fix it. But like in this context, the ministers are on their own accord choosing to live in a luxurious or a slightly more expensive home, in which then the fixers need to be borne by almost taxpayers' money in that sense.
I think there are 2 points here. One is that all landlords need to restore the home to a livable state, number one. Number two, and this is a criticism of the SLA, they should never have allowed the houses to deteriorate to such a condition. So I think it's a bit stupid to leave these houses to deteriorate to such a condition because they could not find a tenant. Right? Because if you can even maintain it in a more basic way in those years that they were empty, then just before the tenant moves in, you don't have to spend so much money.
It's a lot cheaper to have maintained it than
correct
to rebuild
correct.
it. For context, before the ministers moved in, those houses were vacant and for rent for like 4 to 6 years.
So I think another commentator, I think it was actually Ho Ching, who actually said that she also disagrees with the way SLA manages it, in the sense that if that guy is willing to pay 1,000 less than the guide rent, better to have someone move in and live in the house and maintain the house than to let the house deteriorate to such a state of disrepair that you have to spend $500,000 to, I think another house was 1.2 million, right, to restore it to a habitable state. So I think the SLA needs to bear some criticism. I think they need to see how they can better manage these heritage houses.
But something that I saw, it was actually from one of your comment sections, was that this person commented that he feels that most people are upset because normal people are struggling, yet ministers are staying in big bungalows.
I think that comes to the crux of the matter. I think if you look at the criticisms online, there are two strands. The intelligentsia are upset about the procedures, about conflicts of interest, about the ministerial code. But I think the average Singaporeans are not so upset about that. They're more upset with what you said, the optics, right? The perception that, hey, our leaders are living in palatial homes whilst I'm struggling. And I think that cannot be helped. I think, and as I said, again, there are two sides of the coin. One is that public office holders do have to be more careful about the optics, because no matter what, we are human beings, we have emotions, we're going to react emotively. But on the other hand, we cannot play the politics of envy. As long as our leaders are doing their job, they should be free to live within their means, right? If it's something that they can afford. And both Minister Shanmugam and Balakrishnan can definitely afford this kind of lifestyle even before they got into government, then they should be allowed to live as they please without the people playing the politics of envy. Otherwise, as I've said a lot in my posts, people of ability are not going to be willing to step up and serve.
I think before we actually move into that, there was something that you mentioned was guide rent, and I think for me, as I was reading like the statements that were made by Minister Edwin Tong, for example, I think he was explaining how when the ministers or anybody who wants to rent out these apartments, these bungalows, there are really two ways, and one of it is open bidding, or the other is direct letting, and it's at the discretion of SLA to determine these processes. And so when Minister Shanmugam and Minister Balakrishnan were renting these places, they were both done via direct letting. And even though everything seems to be cleared up, it feels a little bit like, hey, how come they were able to know exactly how much they needed to bid?
I think that the guide rent can be guessed quite easily.
Sorry, to answer your question a bit also, something that I read was that in houses that has become a semi-unlivable state already, and like not been rented out for a long time, they actually, for direct tenancy, they actually ask SLA for like, what is a sum that you are asking for? Then they will bid around that price.
Yes.
Which might explain why it was like quite similar.
Correct. I think because Min Shan was a very senior lawyer, he follows procedures and processes very fastidiously. So he knew the knew the process, and he recused himself.
So just to make this a little bit more hypothetical and a bit lighter, technically, right? So it's not published like who's bidding for one when direct letting, but technically, if you knew, you could actually have subbed these two ministers by then bidding a little bit higher than them,
and they will be outbid. Yeah, correct. And actually at the end of the 10 years, even if you do improvements, I'm sorry, your time is up. We're gonna have to open it up for bidding. So one of my other friends was really upset as well. You know, he lived in Chippy Gardens for 10 years. He did improvements to the house. He really wanted to extend the lease, but SLA said no. I mean, your time is up. It's time someone else must be given the chance to stay there.
So moving past the politics of envy thing, something else that people then started latching onto was that CPIB was actually brought in to investigate, but then it felt like a ownself check ownself situation, because it felt like PAP had made a big fuss over the WP Raisha
so I
Khan
think
situation.
this is absolutely ridiculous. If it's like that, then everything is ownself check ownself, right? Because again, this is partly a consequence of the PAP being in power for so long. We cannot tell the difference between the government, which are politicians, and the civil service, which are bureaucrats. So the civil service, the police, they are all independent, right? So if you went to a country like the UK, where there are regular changes of power, the police, the corruption bureau of that country or whatever, they are independent of politics. They have nothing to do with the politicians. The party is the party, the government is the government, the politicians are the politicians, the civil servants are the civil servants, and they are separate, right? Our courts are independent, right? Our police, our CPIB is independent as well.
But would you say it would have been fairer if we had, say, for example, Mr. Pritam Singh, who is leader of the opposition, be part of that investigation panel as well?
No, because he is a politician. He's not a professional investigator. You want to get a professional investigator, and the CPIB is even more professional than a professional. They are specialized in investigating corrupt practices, as the name says, right? Right, and they are the right people to ask to investigate corruption, not a politician.
But I think that, like, if say for example we had included some form of like a special committee or what, right? Then maybe people would have felt like, say, Mr. Pritam Singh would have like probed more thoroughly.
Okay, so then
questions.
the question is that, are you trying to play politics? Is this a political issue, or is this an issue of whether a crime has been committed, or something that is illegal has been committed? Why would you put this to a political committee?
I do feel like, okay, you rightly mentioned, doing that would be politicizing the whole thing, but it has already been very heavily politicized to begin with.
So we need to depoliticize the situation.
What then would you think would happen if, let's say, since it's already so politicized, to a certain extent, we are not just trying to figure out whether corruption takes place. At a certain extent, we are also trying to, or they would then need to assure the people that corruption hasn't taken place. And that's two different matters.
So correct. So we need to very clearly demarcate what is legal, illegal, corrupt, uncorrupt. I think so. That part has been sorted. We know that nothing wrong was done. There was no corruption. so on and so forth. So that one is done. Let's move on. Now there is the politics, which I said is the optics. Then it's up to the politicians to explain, right? So for example, Minister Shanmugam gave a very moving speech about how just because he was staying in a GCB doesn't mean he cannot empathize with the people because he grew up in rental housing. And that is politics about whether now the politicians have to come out and convince the electorate that, listen, even though it has been proven that I've done nothing wrong, I'm not corrupt, but I know that some of you feel a certain way. Let me convince you that I am someone that can still lead you, someone that you can still trust, someone that can still empathize with you, despite the fact that my lifestyle might be something very different from yours.
Yeah.
Well, do you feel like it was a strategy from the opposition? Because now you've created a situation where the ministers have to come out and say, I've spent $400,000 just to improve my house.
So I think this is very harmful to people who are thinking about serving, because not only are your private lives exposed, now everyone knows where they live.
Yeah.
Google Earth images of their houses have been exposed.
Yeah.
And if I were their wives and their family, I'll be pretty upset, right?
Right.
So I think, we might be spiraling down towards the Western standards of politics, where there are gutter politics that are being played out in terms of digging up the private lives of public office holders and making a scandal out of it, which I think would be terribly detrimental to Singapore.
Yeah.
So I think, as in your opinion as a political commentator, how badly do you think this has affected or hurt the two ministers?
Okay, it is very difficult to generalize. I think if I were the politician, I'm not a politician, I would look at each demographic very differently, right? So where the intelligentsia are concerned, they seem to be very focused on procedures, about conflicts of interest. They need to be persuaded that the ministerial code has been interpreted a bit wrongly by those people who have said that the perceptions of conflict of interest have not been adequately looked at. I think Member of Parliament Murali has put out a post today or yesterday that clears the air somewhat for this. So the intelligentsia has to be convinced rationally, logically, and explained in a certain way. The average person, I think, as you said, is a lot of it has to do with the perception that the leaders are leading a life that is so out of sync with theirs. So I think that is a deeper problem, and I think the politicians have to step up and not only show that they can still empathize, but also let actions speak louder than words. So what can they do to make sure that, despite the fact that they might be living comfortably, they are able to help the average person?
But it's so difficult though, especially if you're a holder of like public office, for the public to separate your public and private life, because like they are open to scrutiny in some sense.
Yeah. So I think the rule of thumb must be that things that have nothing to do with the discharge of your duty should be out of bounds. At the end of the day, I mean, optics is a spectrum, right? And then, if you're going to like worry about optics all the time, then ministers shouldn't even drive, right? Because most people don't drive. Then you're going to have to take, I've actually encountered people saying that ministers should not drive. They should be taking public transport, because otherwise how can they how can they empathize with the people? I think, but that is taking things to an absurd extreme.
Okay, maybe I should clarify. So like, I think it's fine for ministers, I think, to live in nice houses and bungalows, but I think the fact that they're renting specifically from a government board, the SLA, I think maybe ministers could have been a little bit better in terms of
I think it's a spectrum. I think it's a value judgment. Renting from the state itself, to some people might be bad optics.
Yeah.
But to other people, it could be that as long as you did it in the right way, that you followed the procedures and the process, then it's okay. During that time, the optics actually looked very good, because this was a house that nobody wanted to stay in. Right? So it's like, hey, no, nobody wants to stay here anyway. It's like a shithole. Like I said, it was pretty much a shithole, right? I saw the pictures. You do so much work to even do it. And for Min Shan's place, there was a mosquito-infested secondary forest. It was breeding mosquitoes. And then SLA made if it was me, I would not have done it. a rather unreasonable request that if you want us to clear it, you got to rent it. It's like if it was me, I would say off.
Yeah.
Right? It is state land. I don't want to stay next to a mosquito infested place. You clear it. Why the should I take on the rent in order for you to clear it?
So I wonder, because something else that people tie with this is that the ministerial pay, which people have historically been upset about. I wonder if there's any proof to go to show that, right, this high pay actually makes us a better government than in other countries where there's
especially based on his
difference.
travels, right? What do you think?
Yeah.
I think that the advantage is not only of a high pay, but a clean wage, right? What we say clean wage is that there are no perks. We pay the minister something, and then we don't actually pay for anything more. We don't pay for like drivers or state cars or state houses or education or private jet and
which
stuff
the
like
US
that.
does.
Right. So a lot of other places, a lot of it is not clean wage. A lot of perks involved. You don't actually know how much the ministers are paid. Right, I would rather pay them well, and then you pay them cleanly, so that you know exactly how much they make, how much they spend. It's up to them. And then if they don't do a good job, every 5 years you have a chance to sack them.
Okay, so thank you very much for watching today's episode, and of course, thank you, Kelvin, for joining us today and giving us many insights. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.
And follow me on Instagram.
And Threads,
Thank
which
you.
is his
Model
new
career.
Threads.
Bye. Thank
you can see his shirtless photo.